All right, Portable Papas, I got something for you. Kind of crazy. We are fans of older stuff. A lot of us here have been playing video games since the 80s and 90s. The golden era of video games, I would say. And in doing so, we have grown fond of games that haven't been out for a while. And so we have to turn to other measures to gain access to these games. Familiar with what I'm getting at here? Emulation. Something that has been a pretty hot topic as of late, especially with some of the stuff that's happening with Nintendo and the Yuzu, I think is what it was called, and then the Yusu or Suyu or whatever they want to call it. Emulation of the Nintendo Switch. Well, we'll talk about that here. Very importantly, very, very important stuff here just in a second. But I have, looked into emulation in different ways, whether it was with the RG35XX Plus, this little beauty. I updated it, and it's much better than it was before. Now, I'm gonna get into this Nintendo Switch thing because there's some very, very important stuff happening that is scary, and it affects you, the gamer. In fact, it not only affects you, it affects anyone who has a Nintendo Switch and could potentially get you in a position where you have your whole system shut down and banned. Not good, but we'll get there in a second. First, I want to say I have been exploring the different ways to play games, older games of mine, because maybe playing on an SP or a 3DS isn't the go-to all the time. I want something a little more practical. I made a statement in yesterday's cup about how I stopped using the RG35XX Plus, because I was using the Steam Deck, and the emulation on there is much better in comparison to the emulation you would find on the RG35, which is true. This is a little bit more beefier. It's definitely more ergonomic in a lot of ways. The screen's bigger. I mean, there's a laundry list of reasons why you would want to use something like the Steam Deck over the RG35XX Plus, but there's one little feature about this that makes it better. It's now sitting comfortably in my pocket. Something that is, when it comes to a game like, I don't know, Pokemon Ruby, which I own, or Sapphire, it makes it a little bit more manageable. You just have it in your pocket, right? Can you play that on the Steam Deck? Sure. But the Steam Deck isn't the most compact little guy. Some of these older games that you want to play, you might want to play on something like a Steam Deck, like maybe Ocarina of Time, or maybe something a little more powerful, something on a GameCube or PlayStation 2. You can look into that. But this isn't about emulating on the Steam Deck. I will say, though, that I have since amended my statement about the RG35XX Plus since installing the new firmware, which is Ambernix firmware, not the, soon released Garlic OS 2.0. It's an alpha right now. It's not quite there yet for the public. You can put an alpha copy on there if you want, but I don't want. I would say, the Ambernix solution, they fixed a couple things that made what I would say this device unusable, in my opinion. One is this quick suspend. This thing now quick suspends. Very much so quick suspends. And that is so much better. I am doing some tests, and I'll have to release some information to you, whether it is candidly during a live stream, most weekday nights at 7 p.m. till about 9:30 p.m. here on the channel, or if it's in a video. I'm trying to see how the suspend affects battery, because before you would hit the suspend button, and then if you forgot about this, the next morning you'd wake up and it would be completely dead, because the suspend only turned off the display, didn't turn off the processor, so you would still have the thing basically running the game in the background. Not ideal, not optimal for the gaming that you want to do. The reason why you would use a device like this over a Game Boy or a 3DS is that suspend. Although the 3DS does have the suspend menu thing, but it doesn't have access to, unless you have them all, or you have a hacked system. That's a very different conversation for a very, very different time. You can't do the quick suspend of advanced games on something like an SP, at least not as easily. Emulation. Cool. Nintendo Switch emulation. Well, it's becoming more and more possible. We've seen it. It's been around for a while. Hacking the Nintendo Switch and ripping your cartridges is something that is very doable. People are doing it. But we're starting to run into something that is a little bit interesting and scary. And I was doing some research on this because I was curious. I'm like, what is going on with emulation? Now that I'm learning more about it, and game preservation is a better way to put it, how does this look for the Nintendo Switch? With the 3DS store and the Wii U store shutting down completely, also support for some games also no longer being available, where does that leave us as gamers with our devices like a Nintendo Switch? Even though the Nintendo Switch is very much so still supported, and we're probably not going to see any sort of compromise. Those libraries are not going to be in a position where we potentially will lose access to them for 2? Is this a 2 again? Always 2. It's 2 all the time. Cool. By the way, this is mostly for my wife, so I'm actually just gonna drink probably that much. So, a little bit more. That's probably good. The rest is for my wife, because I've drank way too much coffee today. Turn that off. Cool. Well, we have hardware that's now coming out. You don't have to hack your Switch. You don't have to hack anything. It is called the Mig Switch Dumper, or the Mig, right? That's what I believe it's called. Essentially, it's a little card reader. You put your game cart into it. You plug the USB-C into your computer, and you're able to pull the files off of your game cartridge, and now you have essentially the game files accessible to you, and you can run them through different launchers, whether it's the launcher that was available for your Steam Deck. I don't know if you can still get access to it because I don't emulate my Switch. You can actually run the game cart through that dumper directly to this through the USB-C port. Pretty cool. And essentially this turns into a Super Switch. That's really exciting, right? Super, super fun. Lots of great stuff to do, lots of flexibility, really awesome. Game preservation, all these really good things. You now have your library that is available to you digitally, and you can bring that with you wherever you go on multiple devices because you own it and you should have access to those files, right? Okay. Whether we agree with that or not, that's not necessarily the case legally, but that is how we feel about it. Okay, there's some gray areas, jumping through loopholes. We're not going to talk about the legality of emulation / game preservation, however you want to look at it, okay? This is not the conversation for today in regards to how you do it. Now, the conversation that we need to have is in the truth and the unfortunate reality of what happens when this product is now getting into the hands of people who have more flexible ideas when it comes to what should and should not be happening with these carts. Or also just people who are willing to steal. And this is where it gets really scary. Now, the video I was watching a creator talk about how to use the actual device itself, and then went into a conversation about what happens when this gets abused. Because it doesn't affect the user originally, it affects the secondary user, which is scary. And eventually we'll get back to the first. First things first, let me give you a scenario. You have your games. You're like, okay, I have Breath of the Wild. I want to pull Breath of the Wild and have that on my Steam Deck so I can play it at better resolution, whatever it may be. Okay? Cool. You do it. Awesome. Then you go and say, hey, I'm actually going to go ahead and sell it. Yeah, I'm going to sell it. I don't really need it anymore. I got rid of my Switch. I have all of my games on my device itself. I'm just going to sell it. Go to GameStop, hand it over to them. They take it. They give you the $7 for that $60 game or whatever, however much they give it to you. And then, Bob's your uncle. You're good. You have your games right here. Right there. Good to go. You're playing them on your Steam Deck. You're fine. Well, let's just say Timmy or Tammy, whichever one you want to decide you for the story, walk into the store. They've saved their money. They've been working really hard, mowing lawns, whatever you want to say. And Timmy and Tammy come up. They go, hey, I want to buy a copy of Breath of the Wild. I finally can buy Breath of the Wild. I'm going to buy a used copy because it's cheaper, and that means I get to play it, and I don't have to buy a brand new copy that costs a bunch of money. Or, and I'll get to this in a second, a very, very dire scenario that could be very damaging to companies. Well, GameStop goes, here you go. Here's the copy. You paid for it. They put it into their system. Everything's good. They download it. They start playing it. They're connected to the internet. The certificate that is unique to the cartridge itself, the actual game itself, has a unique certificate that is a part of the download file and is required for that game to launch. Hits wireless. And the person who originally ripped the game off of the cartridge that was theirs, that they then sold, is also playing it at the exact same time. At that moment, there is a potential, whether it's high or low, it doesn't matter, it still exists, for legit cart A and now fake cart or fake game A to hit the same time in now both authentications. Both certificates are accessible by Nintendo, and they see, oh, we have some nefarious business. And they go in and ban the accounts that are associated with that because they have broken the TOS, they have duplicated the game illegally, and that duplication now means that that file, that specific game, is indeed a pirated piece of software, and they are handling it accordingly by just blacklisting that game. Or, worse yet, the accounts associated with that game. Super ungood, right? That is the one scenario. You go, well, that's fine, I'll just buy new. Okay, companies. There is a company that I support, I've used when I first started this channel, and I have even considered using again, but now I will not use, called Gamefly. Gamefly is a very cool service. It lets you rent physical copies of games through their service. Awesome, great, super awesome. It is one game at a time, and you take that game cartridge, you put it into your device, they play your game, you're good to go. What happens when we have, again, people who have flexible morals when it comes to this going, I have the Mig Switch dumper, I have Gamefly subscription, I have plenty of time to just get these games in, pull, rip, dump, send back, pull, rip, dump, send back. They build out their library, or worse yet, build out illegal versions of this library over and over and over again until now these games are being hot swapped around so many times that these game licenses are now being duplicated and these certificates are being duplicated over and over and over again to a point of where it is now unknown which games you get as a rental, which games you get as used are going to potentially be the game that you will experience some sort of notification from Nintendo going, hey, you've duplicated your game illegally. It is now present in both these devices. We are banning your account. The person in the video I was watching said that this actual thing happened to their friend. They were using a game that had been duplicated, and in using their game, their account got banned. Heck, I could even duplicate games myself just to have it on multiple devices, but if I'm using Super Mario Wonder on my Steam Deck for some reason, and then my daughter grabs the cartridge, puts it in her device, and we don't know that we're both using it at the same time, could potentially get her account banned. This kind of thing exists for this very purpose, which is duplication, right? This is something we're trying to avoid. We're trying to avoid piracy. Companies are trying to put safety measures in place, and people are always trying to push the boundary in the name of, whatever it may be. I'm very much so for game preservation. I think it's important. I just recently purchased a Nintendo 64, Ocarina of Time, and I want to play it on original hardware just for fun. I have access to it, of course, through my 3DS. I also have it on my Nintendo Switch, and I can use that with the Switch's, Nintendo's remake of the N64 controller. I can do all of these things, but it doesn't really feel the same as using it on the N64, I guess. Well, the real thing is, N64, the best way to play it is probably going to be upscaled to some extent, which is a ROM hack kind of thing. And in doing so, I mean, the 3DS version is probably the best, but I want to play my Nintendo 64. The best way to do that is getting a CRT TV. That's just not like realistic for people to be like, I really want to play whatever it may be. I really want to play some weird N64 game that I played, Buck Bumble or something, you know? Shout out to Buck Bumble players. They're going to have to go out and purchase a Nintendo 64, and with that Nintendo 64, either get an adapter to adapt it to an HDMI, or go and buy another, like an actual TV to like experience it better, because HDMI adapters on a 4K TV is just gross. You know, actually playing it on a CRT TV is going to look a little bit better. That's not realistic. That game isn't anywhere. They can't go out and buy it. They have to buy it as a Nintendo 64 cartridge, or they can emulate it. They can get it, they can pull it off the card itself, they can acquire it other ways, and they can play games that way, which when it comes down to games that are no longer accessible to us, that is very, very, I think, important. Game preservation's huge. There's some games out there that were masterpieces that never got any second runs or remakes, and so they're just going to die with history. Fine, you know, it's unfortunate, but it's the reality of things. As time goes on, we know that Nintendo doesn't intend on keeping all of their services alive all the time. Now, I will say that the 3DS and the Wii U both had online services, but they were attached to the physical hardware itself. Your account was tied to the physical device. You had an online account, but that online account was attached to the physical. If you wiped your physical device, you would lose those things. So, unless you I know you couldn't even put that back on. Those digital purchases were attached. I had an old 3DS with multiple games that I'm never going to have again because it was tied to the physical device itself. Now they have the Nintendo Switch Online service, and with that, they also have your Nintendo account. I don't know if these are going to be always being refreshed, if the purchases there are going to transfer across, like with Xbox. I don't know. We don't know. This is new, and it's been introduced with the Switch, and we don't know how they're going to take care of this moving forward. We don't. We can speculate based on history, but this is a new service for them. So they very well could support their titles forever and a day, even though the Nintendo Switch store in the next 25 years may never not exist anymore. Those digital purchases may all be able to be used still. But that doesn't say that your actual physical cartridges are going to be available to be used continuously. I have a Super Smash Bros. Original Nintendo 64 cartridge that I can play, but the internal battery, the save battery, is dead. I can't actually use the save feature. And so that game is, I can replace the battery, and I intend on doing so, and that I will do on stream. You should join the streams at the evening times. It'll be fun one day when I decide to do that, and I have to get a bunch of equipment to solder and all that stuff. But that being said, the device that I have, the N64, can run the game. The game can run, but the game doesn't run properly because the hardware is old, and it was designed that time. I don't think Nintendo's Switch hardware, the cartridges, are going to have the same problems. But with the internet and all these kind of online services being required, it's really interesting to think what the future of these games is going to look like. And for people who want to preserve their titles by pulling them and backing them up somewhere, awesome. These types of tools are really, really good for that. Just like people who lose their keys want to use something like AirTags. But unfortunately, people do bad things with good pieces of equipment. And it often doesn't affect the person, and it's hard for it to affect the person who's doing the bad things. It affects just about everyone else who is out there. This person I was watching the video of also said that they went into different forums for the Mig Switch dumper, and they looked into what are people using it for, and their very intention for purchasing this was to do exactly what I explained. Rip as many games as possible, as fast as possible, and then now they have all these games digitally. Seems like a dream come true. I can copy as many games. Like back in the day, you would go and borrow CDs from a friend and copy them and just pull and do this. The beginning of piracy. But as it stands now, there are a lot of more sophisticated ways for these companies to track the very games that they have And this poses a huge threat to the user, to you in the used game market, rendering a lot of these used games not useless, but dangerous to buy. That's not fun. That's super not fun. I don't know what the solution is. I think the only solution right now to ensure that you are going to be able to use a game that is, well, not going to ban your account is to either buy new or buy now. Because as this thing hits the market and starts getting shipped to people more and more and more, there is a higher potential for delinquents to do this type of thing and cause harm across the board to multiple users. Maybe Nintendo will create something to verify that the person who has the used game is indeed using a real copy. It is theirs. They are not the pirater, but I don't know. It's really not their problem. This isn't Nintendo's problem. This is unfortunately a problem that's been introduced with this device that is coming to market, which I think is a great device. I think the idea of backing up your games is awesome, but just because the idea is good doesn't mean the implementation is good because of unfortunately bad people doing bad things. It's just the reality of it all. Yeah, interesting topic, right? Let me know what you guys think in the thing below. Let me know if I missed stuff or if there's information that you're like, I think that this might work or whatever it may be. I'm always wanting to talk more about this, especially when it comes to video games and some sort of thing. I think about my kids. How bummed would I be? My kids saved up all their money to go buy a game. They went and bought a used copy and they brought it home and then their whole account got banned because someone else stole that copy beforehand and decided, I'm just going to buy and return and then steal the actual ROM file. Sucks. The good news is if you own your games and no one else touches them, you're totally okay. You're totally fine and you'll be okay. So there's that. Okay, please grab a shirt. These are sick, right? Sick. Awesome. All right, as always, happy gaming.